Grit every day, daily, daily, daily. Thank you, Jordan French. Thank you, Grit Daily House. This has been great. We've had a great relationship, and we continue to build this community here and support everyone that's involved. It is actually a very, very great pleasure today, and the panelists that we have on this session is amazing. The topic is the math of socially responsible investing in blockchain. That's a mouthful, but it really means how are we going to invest responsibly for the global community rather than just like nitty-gritty people in San Francisco or New York. So I'd like to welcome Evin with the World Economic Policy Analyst. Please use the wrap there as well. So Evin Cheikosman, did I say it correctly? Cheikosman, thank you very much. And then we have Leah Callon-Butler of Emphasis. We won't go into the origins of the name Emphasis, but you'll ask her privately. And Nina Amoils of A100X Ventures, please join us. Thank you so much. Now, that was a very lame round of applause. Do you want to wait till after? Come on, guys. Here we go. That's right. You've all had coffee or kombucha this morning, so let's go. I'm going to let Evin start with an introduction, and we'll just go this way of who we are and what you do, and then we'll get back into the panel topics, if that's okay, Evin. Please start.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here at Consensus and join Grit Daily House. My name is Evin Cheikosman. I'm a policy analyst for the World Economic Forum's Crypto Impact and Sustainability Accelerator. We love our long names and our acronyms. It's also known as CISA, and it operates out of our Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution hub in San Francisco, California. And there, I drive project delivery and content strategy for our crypto sustainability work, which essentially looks at how to explore the potential crypto has to help efforts around environmental sustainability efforts and helping other industries across the globe to reach their climate goals faster and more effectively.
That is so awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I also just want to do a shout out to Grit Daily House. Thank you for actively recruiting female speakers. It's really cool to be on a panel with 3 women. That doesn't happen a lot. My name's Leah Callon-Butler. I'm the director of a consulting firm called Emphasis. We're focused on Web3 for social impact. And I'm also a CoinDesk opinion columnist. I've mainly covered how blockchain is being adopted across Southeast Asia, as I've been based in the Philippines for the last 4 years. And I was the writer and narrator of a mini documentary called Play to Earn, NFT gaming in the Philippines, which covered the rise of Axie Infinity in sort of around early 2021.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nisa Amoils. So great to be here. Thank you, Grit Daily. So I come from the investing side. I run a venture capital fund called A100X, and a lot of what we invest in is it's all blockchain, and a lot of it is blockchain for social impact. A lot of our portfolio companies are trying to solve longstanding problems, climate being one of them, but also healthcare, supply chains, and identity and legal and title and all these other areas that really are often ignored by big crypto funds. And so I also wrote a book about investing in impact in blockchain, and interviewed 13 female founders, and a big supporter of female founders in the space. And so, just happy to be here to talk that this is getting airtime and narrative. It's really important and doesn't get enough. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. And I've got to say that what I've seen over the last 3 or 4 months that we've been doing these interviews, women are taking the lead in everything that we talk about today, which is the blockchain, ESG, and crypto, especially crypto that is relevant. We've got crypto that is irrelevant, which are a whole bunch of folks chasing hype, not making a difference in this world. But crypto that is relevant is being led by women, I think. And Evin, if I would ask you to set the stage for us, I want to take us out of the U.S. a little bit, take us out of this little bubble that we're all familiar with, and talk to us a little bit about what you see happening globally in Asia, Africa, South America, and set the stage for us for this conversation, please.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm going to add one there. I'm going to actually talk about the Middle East. It's usually left out of conversation when we talk about crypto. So, taking the Palestine example as a case here, there are about 6 million Palestinians in the West Bank. This includes East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, and they use the Israeli currency to the benefit of the Israeli economy, but to the detriment of their own. And the financial privilege that a lot of that Israel actually enforces upon Palestinians has led to the Palestinians' lack of economic sovereignty and has deeply damaged their ability to look at future prospects and to grow as a civilization. But what we're seeing is that over the past 2 years, there has been growing demand for Bitcoin in Gaza, especially among Palestinian youth. And this has led to what is being called a resistance economy, where Palestinians are being able to separate themselves and decrease their dependence upon the Israeli monetary system. And just to add here for context that money is arguably the driving force behind a lot of the issues that we see with the Palestinians' state of play right now. Occupation, corruption, and war has driven many de-development initiatives, has driven civilizational stagnation, as well as the erosion of capital stock. And this is something that is actually leading Palestinians to look around and be like, okay, well, how can crypto be a form of freedom money for me to actually separate from a legacy financial system that has only served to disenfranchise me? And this is something that we're seeing a lot in cases with Afghanistan, Ukraine, even for minorities like the Kurds in Southeast Turkey. And it's really great to see just how these cases are enveloping and how the politicization of finance in many of these pockets of the world are beginning to be turned on its feet.
Thank you. That was a good, the good background there. And if we can have a little bit, Leah, what you see happening with particular use cases that are relevant in using blockchain or blockchain-related crypto in these emerging nations.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I've actually been based in the Philippines since 2018, and I used to be really excited about things like remittances. I kind of feel like that was the thing that everyone talked about. Blockchain for remittances, it's so great, it's going to make them faster and cheaper. But then it was mid-lockdown, so around mid-2020, I heard from a friend this story of a little community in the rural Philippines playing a blockchain game to put food on the table when they'd lost their jobs. Many of them were low-skilled workers, so perhaps they were trike drivers, which is kind of like the Philippines version of a taxi, or perhaps they pushed food carts, or they were cleaners. Unfortunately, they'd all lost their jobs. They were stuck at home. There was very minimal government relief and few ways for them to make money. So when I heard about this, I actually thought it sounded too good to be true. I had to go and investigate for myself. But sure enough, there were these people playing Axie Infinity to put food on the table. I think what was really exciting about that, though, was that I feel in the past, Bitcoin has always been a pay-to-play game. So we talk about the economic opportunities and the wealth creation that could come of it, but you have to have money to get into it first. You have to buy it. This was the first time people were able to earn crypto by contributing their time and skill to an in-game economy where the assets that they were winning, just for like winning an Axie battle, could actually be cashed out. Put on top of that, if we go all the way back to mid-2020, it was very difficult to do that. So you had to sync your in-game reward tokens on a decentralized exchange to be able to swap out to Ethereum and then send to a regulated exchange to be able to cash out to Fiat, which is actually using some quite advanced and complex Web3 tools. But these people had the incentive to do it. I think what really challenged people's perceptions was that we didn't expect to see this happening in a rural community in the Philippines where a lot of people haven't finished school, they were working in low-skilled jobs, and yeah, they're certainly not in the metro area. So that really kind of changed our idea about, you know, who could confidently and effectively use these tools. The final thing I'll add to that, though, is that if you know anyone from the Philippines, you'll probably know that it's really baked into the culture that a lot of people have to leave the Philippines to go overseas to find work, and they all send money home. There's even a term for it. It's the Overseas Filipino Worker, or OFW. And we saw a new term rise from the success of Axie Infinity, which was the Metaverse Filipino worker. So people started proudly calling themselves an MFW because they were able to earn money from home without the threat of the virus, in their face, just with a mobile phone, and earn a legitimate income. So that really changed my thinking around what Web3 could do for people. Above and beyond just earning an income, perhaps it also means that they can stay in their country, they don't have to break up families, and they can contribute to their own national economy rather than having to leave. So it's been a pretty wild ride.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. And Nisa, if you haven't read up on her already, has been recognized by various publications as the top 100 in fintech investment, women 100 top, and 50 in the blockchain sector. So, yeah, she's done a lot of work there and been recognized for her work and her forward thinking. Round of applause for that. We have to recognize the accomplishments here, Nisa. So as we look through fintech investment and blockchain in particular, how do you see these investments happening in this emerging environment? And then after that, I actually want to get into a little bit of the regulatory environment that a lot of companies are facing. But talk to us about what you're seeing in terms of investment to enable blockchain and fintech in emerging nations.
Yeah, so I think these two use cases are great ones. Obviously very bullish on gaming as well. But I think there's some other ones that maybe don't get enough airtime. Those are the entrepreneurs that we're seeing coming out of industry and using the technology. And maybe they're not crypto native, or they're not issuing a token just for speculative purposes, but they're actually building for the long term, which as a venture investor is my lens, right? I'm not looking at the prices every day, and I'm looking for how this is going to solve problems in 5 and 10 years' time. And so we're seeing a lot of them that are building, trying to solve climate issues, actually. A lot of those are coming from Europe. And they're using tokenization as a means to incentivize certain behavior, or they're creating securitized instruments that then have more secondary trading opportunities, whereas none existed before, and that opens up the market to a broader set of people. So where the Jobs Act started and created crowdfunding, tokenization has taken that even further. And I think it will continue in that direction, because there's just a lot of people who've been closed off to private investments in the world for a very long time. I mean, the US only has 8 million accredited investors. So if you think about that, a lot of change can be done by mobilizing communities through tokenization. And that's a lot of what we're backing. And as I mentioned, it's not only in climate, they're solving problems that became very apparent in healthcare during the pandemic, whether that be, clinical trials on a blockchain, or provenance of your own medical records, or, even contact tracing. So there's so many different use cases that we're seeing that are often ignored. And I think that's the narrative that the US government maybe doesn't see. We're mired in this regulatory swamp, and we have been for a while. And so, there's a lot of trying to solve that now. But they often just don't see, they see DeFi for, hacks and scams or bad actors, but they don't necessarily see that DeFi was intended to democratize finance, right? And it just hasn't gotten there yet. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we fund entrepreneurs that are building in this sector, the more regulation will fall in place, and the more we will be able to get there. We're seeing a lot of opportunity in Africa right now, like funded a bunch of companies there, and really globally, but it's not necessarily just crypto speculation. It's a different type of person.
I think that's a really important kickoff point, because what we are seeing with the local governmental environment here, with the from Washington and the White House, is saying, hey, crypto is junk. Most tokens don't have value, and how can you attribute a value to any of these things? So that's a really good talking off point. And so as we look at how we are reacting as a country to DeFi and tokenization, we seem to be taking the negative approach. Yet there is a lot of value being built and created in the rest of the world. So the political question, or the geopolitical question, is: will there be countries that are not the US and not Europe and not London and not Brexit and not the European Union that will start to take over in terms of value and proposition and the community that's going to use a lot of these tokens? I mean, Nisa, why don't we start with you and then finish up with Evin?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've already seen that there's a lot of regulatory arbitrage going on. There's a lot of Cayman or Bermuda or a lot of Puerto Rico. A lot of people have moved offshore to build elsewhere for that reason, and that's the loss that the U.S. has had in their lag of regulating this, is that they're losing innovation. So if you look at Biden's executive order on the Responsible Innovation Act, and Loomis and Gillibrand just this week, proposed a bill of how to put that into play, and whether parts of that survive or not is up for debate. But I think it's part of what we have to do as the United States to make sure that. Yes, we'll deal with the bad actors, which are like 1% of all the actors. It gets a lot of press, but if you look at the numbers, it's actually pretty small. But to be able to support the good actors, and I think everybody's just asking for clarity on the token taxonomy. And we just have been operating in an environment where we haven't really had that. So then you see a lot of just enforcement actions and down rounds and things like that happening after the fact, which isn't necessarily where we want to be.
Sure. Let's talk about a little bit of what's happening in the rest of the world, especially Asia, since you brought up that as an example. Do you see, I can't let's talk about the Philippines. Will the Philippines adopt a currency that's not fiat or and move to something else just because they see a bunch of their population embracing it much more?
Yeah, well, we've actually already heard the Philippine Central Bank talk about the possibility of doing a CBDC. But actually, one of the most interesting things, again, out of the Axie Infinity phenomenon was that we saw that merchants around the Philippines started readily accepting SLP, which is Axie's in-game reward token. So I wrote a story about it for CoinDesk. We did a quick search on Facebook and came up with literally hundreds of physical retailers who were accepting SLP as payment by a QR code on the Ronin sidechain. I'm talking a baby's toy shop, a dermatologist, a dentist, a car repair shop. They were all accepting it because they knew that there was this new segment of the population that was earning in this currency. So, they could go straight to them and give them a way to pay with it directly. I thought that was extraordinary because if we go back to 2017, I remember, a lot of the Ethereum projects, that was kind of the holy grail. Our token has so much utility, you can use it to pay for anything. But we didn't always kind of see that take up. So seeing it happen organically in the Philippines was very cool. But I guess just to follow on from what Nisa was talking about as well, I think the opportunity in the Philippines is that potential for leapfrog innovation because they're not bogged down by those legacy systems. So for example, Philippines, you go back to early 1990s, I believe it was only about 1% of all transactions that were being done electronically. So the central bank wanted to raise that target. They had a very aggressive target. They wanted to get to 10%. Once they hit that, they increased it to 30% of all transactions. And they did recognize that crypto and blockchain could play a very big part in achieving those goals. So we have seen some quite friendly approaches, flexible approaches from a regulatory standpoint so that we can kind of accelerate that adoption and, help the government actually get to their goals in terms of using electronic payments.
Thank you. Evin, I'm going to go back to you with, I think, how much time do we have? A couple of minutes. Just if you have any questions, I'm going to be asking the audience next for questions. But Evin, when Bitcoin was created, there was a purpose, right? A hedge against inflation and a currency of choice for a global environment and community. We've heard now that there are a lot of other coins and tokens that serve purposes much more efficiently than Bitcoin does in certain areas. What is your thought globally about Bitcoin and its use case as originally described?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like that just kind of piggybacks off of what I said earlier. So I'm not going to bore you all with a repetition of what I just said. But, but what I will say is that I would love to actually take this conversation around to energy security, Kamal, because I think that that's something that's really top of mind for a lot of people, especially in the regulatory space, especially policymakers that we're speaking to at the World Economic Forum and in our CISA work. I mean, it's something that we should definitely be looking at right now. So as we all know, Russia invaded Ukraine. And since then, the energy prices globally have skyrocketed. U.S. President Biden has since banned Russian oil imports and has called for the U.S., which derives 61% of its energy from fossil fuels, to regain its energy independence. Whether it really wants to do that is yet to be seen, but you know, it is something that they said. And this is where I believe crypto mining actually can help, because crypto mining actually uses 58% approximately of renewable energy. And this is something I feel that can actually step in and help a gap that is so much more widening right now in the geopolitical sphere. So for those of us that don't know the process entirely, crypto mining is the process that gives way to it being a clean, or rather a buyer of last resort that could be turned on or off at any point, at any given day, throughout anywhere in the globe. And this makes it really beneficial for renewables such as solar and wind, for example, that suffer deficiencies around being too overabundant or being non-existent in terms of the energy that they supply. So a lot of the times we're seeing now that crypto is actually incentivizing the greater buying of solar and wind energy being built. And this is actually helping to retire fossil fuels faster and, in effect, the dependence on Russian energy. So I think that this is something that's a huge opportunity, especially as we're sort of seeing moratoriums happen by the New York State, as we're seeing the White House Science for Policy Innovation looking at crypto mining and looking at the risks and opportunities that this technology presents to the space. And this is something I feel like that's going to be further explored, especially as part of the regulatory conversation going forward.
Yeah, I think let's put things into perspective before I go to any audience questions. It's like, if you look at what we're dealing with, we're sitting in the US, maybe 400 million population. We've got a percentage of those people that are making a difference. Then we look at the rest of the globe, that's 8 billion population. Africa over the next 20 years was going to surpass both India and China combined in terms of population growth. If we look at some of the comments that you made about how women across these developing countries are making a difference by using crypto and sustaining life, we look at all three of you here assessing investment opportunity and making decisions. If we keep that into perspective, you see that there's this whole class of unrepresented or unrecognized people making a difference globally, and we should pay attention to that, I think, more realistically, to pay attention, whether it's investments, whether it's building technology, and whether it's deploying technologies that make a difference globally. So I'm glad we put that into perspective. I know there's so much to unpack with all three of you, with your background and experiences, but like in anything else, it's we're limited by time. Are there any burning questions out there? Yes.
I just wanted to commend her for talking about the incentivization of Bitcoin mining instead of like actually being like correct in it. So many people talk about, well, it uses all the energy of a small country, or it doesn't use as much as tumble dryers worldwide, right? And so I wrote an article in Constitution I can give back in 2018 saying that it would be one of the things, and I'm so glad that the left is recognizing it and that's happening. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And I actually recognized that article, by the way.
So I think it comes down to old narrative, right? Who has the most interest in creating a narrative that's most beneficial to them? And that narrative oftentimes is skewed to the readers of it, but it doesn't mirror the reality of the world that we live in most cases. So I wanted to, a round of applause to this awesome panel. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Creating an environment of knowledge and understanding of where we are and what we should be looking out for. Thank you.
One more big round.